Վրաստանի արտաքին քաղաքականությանը տեղի ունեցող այս փոփոխությունների ֆոնին եւ որպես բանախոս մենք հյուրընկալել ենք Georgian Institute of Public Affairs-ի ներկայացնող Թոռնիկե Շարաշենիձեին. Mr. Շարաշենիձե, in this new reality, the small states like Armenia and Georgia are facing very serious pressure from Russia and, of course, from some Western partners. Please share with us how Georgia is dealing with these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to outline a few key points for the Georgian foreign policy. Georgia is a small state, as we all know, and small states have to obtain some kind of function in order to survive, especially when you are located in a region like South Caucasus. And Georgia is no exclusion, of course. Georgia is very much obliged to have some kind of a function now because it's a part of energy corridor. Energy corridor was something that put Georgia back on map. Georgia now at this moment has, I would say, fully explored potential of its energy partnership with Azerbaijan and Turkey, and Georgia now welcomes Armenia back to the region because we deeply believe that with having Armenia as a partner, it will enhance further Georgia's potential as an energy hub. Second point, Georgia is a small country, and Georgia has, of course, to take into account the global context and changes in global order. Global order has been changing. China has rising recently, and that was one of the main reasons why actually Georgia signed a strategic partnership agreement with China, which was followed, as we all know, with a mixed reception, because some people both inside and outside Georgia accused Georgian authorities, of deviating from pro-Western orientation and assuming like pro-Chinese orientation. Well, we all know that Georgian authorities have been accused of assuming pro-Russian orientation as well. Now it's pro-Chinese orientation as well. So those two. I forgot about my presentation here. But, how to navigate? Okay. Yes, and another key point, since 2008, Georgia has functioned in survival mode. Since 2008, there is a Russian military base stationed in about 40 kilometers from Tbilisi, and this is something you have to reckon with. And since the war in Ukraine started, of course, Georgia's survival mode has been enhanced further. Because if something happens, if Georgia gives Russia any serious pretext for another aggression, unfortunately the aggression will follow, and there's hardly anyone in the world that can actually help Georgia, because unlike Ukraine, Georgia has no strategic depth. It hardly can be supplied, because Georgia doesn't neighbor with Poland or with Slovakia, as in the case of Ukraine, So there are a few key dimensions in Georgian foreign policy. Why is that? First dimension is regional dimension, of course, which I already mentioned. This is energy economic cooperation with Turkey and Azerbaijan, which actually, as I already said, put Georgia back on map. Second is strategic partnership with Armenia, as we call it now, which is extremely important for Georgia, because Georgia views Armenia definitely as, I would say, the only fellow democracy in the region, as the only country in the region that is now also oriented on the Western orientation or Western integration. And most important thing for Georgia when it comes to regional dimension, we need peace in the region. In order to have peace, you have to be either part of the European Union, or you have to have a balance of power. I'm not afraid of this term. In order to have a peace in a region like South Caucasus, we have to have a balance of power. We're extremely worried now about the situation in South Caucasus because we know that relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan still remain complicated. And Georgia is interested in peace both because it feels certain affiliation with Armenian people, because as we all know, we enjoy very close cultural ties, both of our nations. And plus, we are pragmatically interested in peace, of course, because that's a key to our survival and this key to our economic prosperity. The second dimension, that's the relations with the West. Certainly Georgia, Certainly Georgia stays committed to the European integration, no matter what they say out there. We understand very well that ultimate membership in the European Union, it's a, let's say, maybe not long-term perspective, but mid-term perspective. And by that time, of course, Georgia, first of all, has to survive. You have to survive first and then enter somewhere. We all know very well that hardly anyone has any idea how the war in Ukraine will end. And obviously the outcome of the war in Ukraine will seriously affect Georgia's chances for integrating the European Union. And plus, I guess you will agree with me that Georgia and Armenia, if we pair as partners for European integration, will strengthen each other. And I believe without Georgia becoming a member of the European Union, Armenia will find it extremely difficult to get there, and vice versa. Armenians' Western aspirations will make Georgia's bid for European integration even stronger. Second, it's, of course, waiting for a window of opportunity to enter NATO. NATO membership, path to NATO, has become kind of a mission impossible since Russian Federation stationed its military base close to Tbilisi, because it's obvious for everyone that as long as Russian troops stay there on Georgian territory, hardly anyone will accept Georgia into NATO, because it will be almost impossible to protect Georgia from Russian aggression. And third, attempting to get the most from the strategic partnership with the US. We have a strategic charter signed with the US back in 2009, and now we are trying to get the best of it, like visa-free regime, maybe free trade regime as well, we'll see. We have a visa-free regime now with the European Union, as we all know, even with China. Russia actually also, introduced visa-free regime recently, a few months back, which makes actually Georgian passport quite, strong and competitive. Turkey, we also have visa-free regime with Turkey. Now, if the US grants us visa-free regime too, it will make Georgian passport and Georgian citizenship even more attractive. Next slide, please. Well, Russia. Relations with Russia can be described very briefly like don't provoke and don't get provoked, because we already fought two wars with Russia. One back in 92-93, when we fought war in Abkhazia, and at that time the Russian Federation almost openly supported the Abkhazian separatists against Georgia, almost openly, which included not only Cossacks and different volunteers or whoever, but Russian regular troops, including elite forces like Dzikie Gusi, Waldzis, and Second War for 2008. That's what actually made Georgia's foreign policy vis-à-vis Russia extremely cautious, understandably, I would say. Second, getting some economic benefits, of course, from bilateral ties with Russia. Georgia welcomes Russian tourists. Georgia welcomes bilateral trade because at this moment, unfortunately, Georgian products like wine and mineral water, still their main destination is former Soviet Union countries, including, first of all, Russia, of course. Because no matter what happens now at this moment vis-à-vis European Union, we have, of course, the CFTA, we have free trade regime with the European Union, but still Georgian products still find it extremely difficult to access the European market. And the third, making the best of the Georgian soft power vis-à-vis Russia. The more Russian tourists visit Georgia, the more Russian tourists, return back to Russia with pleasant memories about Georgia. the more difficult it will be for the Russian Federation to wage another war against Georgia, because we all know how it functions. We all know how it works with Russia. When they are going to attack someone, first they demonize someone, like they did in the case with Ukraine. First they demonized Ukraine in the eyes of ordinary Russians, and after that they waged the war. Next, please. Ukraine. Unfortunately, we all know that relations remain complicated. The first factor, one of the main factors that poisoned Georgian, Russian, Ukrainian relations, it's the factor of Mikhail Saakashvili, former Georgian president who returned to Georgia. To Georgia, as you know, and he was detained and imprisoned as soon as he was discovered by the Georgian police and security forces. Saakashvili happens to be a citizen of Ukraine, of course, and that has seriously affected bilateral relations. I believe you all know that Saakashvili has strong supporters, influential supporters back in Ukraine, and they definitely influence official Kiev's policy toward Georgia. Obviously, not very many people inside, both inside and outside Georgia, were happy with Georgia's cautious attitude towards the war in Ukraine, and that included, I guess, some of the Ukrainian officials. Maybe someone there in Kiev expected Georgia to wage a war against Russia. Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to accuse someone, definitely. But actually, some people in the Georgian government, I guess, they got the impression that someone would be actually very happy if Georgia was thrown under the bus during the war. Georgia has morally and emotionally supported Ukrainian people, sent vast humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, but despite this fact, relations remain complicated. It has been already said that Georgia has not joined sanctions against Russia. Well, I would say that that's not completely accurate. Georgia has joined some sanctions, mainly financial sanctions against Russia. That includes, for example, the MIR payment system, which doesn't function in Georgia anymore since the start of the war. But Georgia has not joined some of the sanctions imposed by NATO and European Union countries for obvious reason. Georgia is not part of NATO and is not part of European Union. Georgia does not enjoy protection from NATO, and Georgia does not enjoy economic support from the European Union, let's say. That's it. Next slide, please. The rest of the world, including China, first of all. As I already said, Georgia as a small country has to take into account the changing global order. Back in the 90s, Georgia remained, let's say, under the Russian influence, within the sphere of Russian influence, for a very simple reason. At that moment, back in the 90s, the West was not interested in the South Caucasus. As soon as the West realized the importance of the South Caucasus for its own interests, Georgia assumed pro-Western orientation. But since then, we have witnessed, unfortunately, I want to stress this word, relative decline of the US vis-a-vis China. And of course, Georgia had to take, at some extent, this factor into account. Plus, we have to acknowledge once again one thing. Georgia functions in a survival mode, and Georgia welcomes any power in the South Caucasus which may balance the Russian threat. The US definitely such a power which balances Russian threat, and China may also play such a role for Georgia, balance somehow Russian threat, and for that purpose, of course, Georgia tries to make itself important for China as well. And of course, there is we have China as a strong economic partner for Georgia. Georgia has not fully explored its potential as a hub, and now we are hopeful for the future. I'm hopeful for the future because, as I said, we have already, I guess, almost completely explored energy potential thanks to cooperation with Turkey and Azerbaijan, but we still have to build deep water port in Anakle on the Black Sea coast, which will further increase Georgia's importance importance. And of course, there's another very important dimension in Georgia's foreign policy when it comes to the rest of the world, let's say. That's non-recognition policy, which means, of course, not recognizing Abkhazia and South Ossetia as independent states. One of the most serious challenges for Georgia's foreign policy since the war of 2008, when Russia recognized those two entities as independent states. These are the main dimensions of Georgian foreign policy. But as I started my presentation, once again, we have to take into account something which actually we have in common with Armenia. A small state trying simply to survive in a region like the South Caucasus, not in the European Union. In the European Union, we would have no need for balance of power, and we have no need for playing games with Russia and China, etc., etc. We play games, as they say in Russian, нет хорошей жизни. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Шарашенидзе. Sorry. Thank you.